My name's Lauren Price, Senior Operations Analyst at Stratamore in Kent. Though if you asked our CEO, Blake Dawson, he'd probably describe me as part of the background infrastructure. You know, like a chair or a wall socket. 12 years in this place, and I've become invisible enough to haunt it. The morning it all started felt no different. Stale coffee in hand. Empty conference room waiting for someone to pretend they ran the place. The whiteboard still had last week's nonsense scribbled across it. Strategic synergy pivots and vision alignment metrics. All that meaningless buzzword salad Blake loved to toss around after 2 IPAs and a TED Talk. The air smelled like cologne, ego, and faint panic. I was, as always, the first one there, setting up for a meeting I wasn't even invited to. 12 years of keeping the circus upright and still being treated like the stagehand who forgot her cue. My reward? Replacing dry markers and refilling the mini fridge while Blake and his shiny new strategic consultant practiced their fake humility for the board. Her name was Haley, mid-20s, sharp smile, sharper heels, and a job title that seemed to change weekly. Sometimes she was executive liaison, sometimes project strategist, and Blake's personal favorite, co-pilot. No one really knew what she did except exist in his orbit, giggling her way through meetings and using phrases like growth vibes without irony. She'd been here 9 months and already presented slides I wrote, standing where I never stood. She once asked me if a CSV file was some kind of crypto thing, and yet there she was, front row, company darling. Meanwhile, I was still the one adjusting chairs, reprinting slide decks, replacing toner, and pretending not to hear my name mispronounced in thank you emails. Blake had this habit of walking by my desk, phone to his ear, dropping a casual Lauren. "Can you handle setup?" Like it was a favor, not another invisible chore. He'd then stride off with the confidence of a man who thought charisma was a KPI. None of it surprised me anymore. I'd formatted every one of his reports, corrected every half-baked stat, and rewritten entire pitch decks that he later presented as his vision. Every single one of those charts had my fingerprints, but not my name. That morning, as I was taping down a loose cable, I noticed the small red blink of the ceiling camera above the conference table. It had been flickering for weeks. I'd filed a maintenance ticket, low priority of course, 2 Fridays ago. No one cared unless a server exploded or a client noticed. Still, after someone's laptop went missing last week and HR sent out that passive-aggressive "let's all be vigilant" email, I figured I'd nudge it again. Logged into the facility portal, updated the ticket. Camera 4. Still inconsistent, confirm flickered during night mode. Then, back to work. Blake's latest masterpiece was waiting. A 23-slide monstrosity of buzzwords, inflated projections, and agile leadership fluff that could double as a parody. Haley was set to co-present, of course. Blake called it grooming her for leadership. Gross, even without context. I just printed the handouts, topped off the coffee pods, and reminded myself that surviving in this company meant being the ghost that kept the lights on. That was my role. The ghost. Silent, steady, unseen. But as I closed the conference room door and heard Haley's laugh spill out of Blake's office, something cracked inside me. Not a scream, not a scene, just a small, clean fracture. A whisper that said, "Enough." I didn't know what I was looking for yet. Just that something in that blinking camera, that broken rhythm of the office, was trying to tell me something. Ghosts see everything. 3 days later, an iPad went missing from marketing. Not even a good one. Cracked screen, stickers, everywhere. But suddenly, the cameras were everyone's priority. It pushed firmware updates, HR sent more reminders, and then, buried at the bottom of a reply-all chain, I saw it. My ticket had been marked resolved. That was odd. Technically, I wasn't supposed to double-check its work, but I'd learned that resolved often meant we unplugged it and hoped for the best. So, after Blake and Haley left for their usual 2-hour brainstorm at a smoothie bar downtown, I logged into the admin portal using my old facility credentials. I pulled the feed from camera 4. Just a spot check, 5 minutes, nothing unusual. Except what I found wasn't empty hallways. It was Blake and Haley. Tuesday night, 11:14 p.m. At first, I thought maybe they were pulling an all-nighter before the Q3 deadline, but as I leaned closer to the grainy playback, the air in the room around me seemed to stop moving. There was Blake, slumped in his office chair, tie loosened, shirt half untucked like a frat boy who wandered into an executive suite. Haley stood beside him, one hand on his shoulder, the other tapping across his keyboard with the casual familiarity of someone who'd done it before. The camera resolution was garbage, but I could still make out the interface on the screen. The internal dashboard. His dashboard. The one tied to his secure credentials. No one was supposed to touch that machine except him. Every click on that terminal was a legally bound digital signature. Haley wasn't supposed to be within 6 feet of it. She sat down in his chair like she owned the place, scrolling through budget files and timelines while Blake poured amber whiskey into a mug from the minibar. I zoomed in. There it was, a red-bordered form titled Project Orion, Completion Phase 3. My stomach twisted. That project wasn't finished. The vendor had just emailed me 2 days earlier about delivery delays. Yet there she was clicking submit. Blake leaned in, said something I couldn't hear, then toasted her with his mug. I froze the frame, rewound, watched again. His account, his credentials, her hands. I felt the room tilt a little. That wasn't carelessness. That was deliberate. And then, the kicker. The approval form listed my name in the reviewed by field. I hadn't even been in the building that night. The next morning, I came in early, before anyone else. The quiet hum of the fluorescent lights made it feel like I was underwater. I poured cold coffee, opened my laptop, and logged back into the camera system using my legacy credentials, the ones they'd never revoked because no one remembered who maintained the old security stack. I pulled the last 60 days of footage from camera 4 and filtered for after-hours motion. Out of all those nights, I found 6 more with the same pattern. 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., Blake and Haley entering the office through the executive elevator, lights flicking on, whiskey bottle flashing in the reflection of the glass wall. July 12th, July 28th, August 3rd. Every time right before a financial report or milestone closeout. By the 3rd clip, the disgust had settled into something colder, calmer. Blake sitting at his desk, head lolling slightly, Haley standing behind him pointing at the monitor. I zoomed in on the numbers. Adjust budget allocation. Project Orion plus $48,900. He hit enter, she smiled, and the system logged the update under my credentials. The next morning's financial report had my digital signature stamped on it. I ran the audit log. The input terminal matched Blake's laptop. Input user, L Price 42. Credential match, failed. That failure code was everything. Each digital signature in our system used a private key pair tied to the real user's profile. You could spoof the username, but you couldn't fake the hash. Unless you had my machine, you couldn't generate that key, which meant someone copied my old signature block and pasted it into forms under Blake's credentials. The system flagged it, but since he was executive access, no one questioned it. By noon, I'd compiled a small disaster in a spreadsheet, timestamps, audit trail mismatches, camera screenshots, and note columns marked forged approval, after-hours login, manager impaired. My stomach was steady now. Not scared, not even angry, just methodical. Haley waltzed into the office around 9:15 a.m., iced latte in hand, heels tapping like applause for herself. She waved at me. "Morning, Lauren," she chirped. I smiled back, polite, invisible. Let her walk by. Let her sit at his desk and keep thinking the ghost wasn't watching, because I had everything. I knew exactly where to go next. Buried in the IT archives was a dusty old server we used to call the bunker, a leftover compliance relic that logged every admin action the new systems quietly ignored. Blake thought he'd removed my privileges last quarter when he restructured access. On paper, maybe he had. But back end, he forgot one little thing. I'd written part of the original access protocol. I still had the keys. The bunker looked like a relic from the early 2000s. Ugly beige UI, blinking green text, no fancy dashboards. But to someone who knew what to look for, it was pure gold. I logged in through the old admin tunnel, the same one I used back when the system ran on a dedicated Linux box no one dared to decommission. The screen flickered, then loaded a command prompt. I entered Blake's credentials, not to impersonate him, but to see what ghosts he'd left behind. The query spat out 23 authorization events over a 90-day window, all linked to one common factor, the same secondary terminal signature. Haley's. Not literally her name, of course. The logs don't show that. But her keystroke pattern did. Every user has a typing rhythm, a unique cadence like a fingerprint. And Haley? She typed like a teenager texting in traffic. The system captured her erratic input speeds, half-second bursts followed by long pauses. I cross-checked it with her legit logins from her own terminal. Identical pattern. Same variance ratio, same keystroke jitter. There it was. Undeniable. The real shock came when I opened one of the attachments labeled Bonus Tracker V3 XLSX. It sounded harmless, but inside it was chaos dressed as accounting. Contractor hours doubled, material costs padded with expedited delivery fees, backdated invoices from vendors we hadn't used in years. And every single correction just barely crossed the threshold to trigger the performance bonus pool. The payouts were listed neatly. Blake Dawson, $62,400. Haley Monroe, $19,250. Lauren Price, $0. Except my name still appeared on 4 forms as liaison sign-off. I scrolled down and my jaw locked. Someone had pasted my digital signature, the real one, from an old onboarding document into each form. Same pixelated edges, same Comic Sans title block, Comic Sans. They forged my name in Comic Sans. That's when it stopped being betrayal and started being strategy. I created a new folder on an encrypted drive titled Audit Evidence, Private. Each file got its own subfolder. One for the footage, one for the logs, one for the financials. Then I mirrored the whole thing across 3 storage sites, a hidden Google Drive under a burner email, a local encrypted SSD, and an external backup labeled Vacation Photos 2014. I even stashed a duplicate USB behind a fake outlet plate in the maintenance closet. I'd learned the hard way that when corporate panic starts, drives mysteriously fail. Every saved file steadied my breathing. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was survival. Blake had already tied my name to fraud. I wasn't going to wait for HR to investigate while I became the scapegoat. That afternoon, I overheard him through the vent above the copy room, laughing with Haley. "Board's meeting Friday," he said, voice smooth with arrogance. "We'll push the Q3 numbers hard. Show 'em 20% growth without headcount increase." Haley giggled. "That's because I'm the headcount," she joked. They both laughed like hyenas choking on confidence. Then came the part that changed everything. Blake's tone dropped. "After the bonus clears, might be time to trim some dead weight. You know, clean house." I didn't need to hear my name to know. I'd become the dead weight in his eyes. The worker who'd built the system that now threatened him. I leaned on the copier, stared at my reflection in the smudged metal, and felt something ancient wake up. The Lauren he knew, the one who stayed late, cleaned up messes, smiled through dismissal, was gone. In her place was precision. That night, I drafted a single email to the compliance alias. Subject line: Quarterly Systems Integrity Review. Exec Ops Division. Body: Routine review scheduled for Friday morning. Legal observer looped in for visibility. I CC'd our board liaison, Evelyn Hart, a woman whose politeness was surgical. No explanation, no emotion, just protocol. Then I opened my evidence index file and started formatting it like a board packet. Item 1. Security footage. Excerpt, July 14th, 11:46 p.m. Item 2. Bonus form. Project Orion. Forged signature analysis. Item 3. Audit log. Credential mismatch. Item 4. Expense trail. Inflated vendor invoices. Item 5. Compliance violation summary. Section 6.1F breach. By the time I finished numbering them, the air felt clean again. I exported the whole packet as a password-protected PDF, labeled it Suggested Review Before Vote.pdf, and wrote the decryption key on a yellow sticky note. Lauren was here 42. It wasn't revenge yet. It was preparation for justice. Friday morning came disguised as every other one. Buzzing fluorescent lights, burnt coffee, and the faint smell of desperation that clung to the carpets. But this time, I wasn't the invisible one. I was the fuse. I arrived early, as usual, but not to fetch coffee or straighten chairs. My index packet sat neatly on Evelyn Hart's reserved seat in the boardroom, tucked under her leather portfolio. The sticky note with the password was folded once, hidden under her coaster. Simple, quiet, precise. I walked back to my desk, the hum of the office machines syncing with my pulse. The countdown had started. At 9:04 a.m., Blake strutted in, reeking of cologne and overconfidence. His tie was bold enough to be a warning sign. He gave me that fake smile, the kind a man gives his dry cleaner before stiffing the tip. "Lauren," he said, tapping his knuckles on my desk. "Can you grab coffee for the exec team? Let's make it look sharp today." The words barely registered. I smiled. "Of course." Then I stood, calm as clockwork. In the break room, I prepped 6 cups, black, sweetened, decaf, the usual chaos. I slipped a matte black USB into the cardboard carrier's underside, taped flat against the base. It was labeled Q3 Budget Backup, LP. If anyone asked, it was just a spare data drive. I carried it back to the boardroom, set the tray by the back wall, and as I passed Evelyn's chair, I pulled the USB free and slid it beneath her portfolio. No one saw. Blake was too busy warming up the room with his motivational nonsense. "Teamwork, innovation, resilience," he said, hitting his favorite LinkedIn trifecta. Haley sat near him, posture rehearsed, smile sharp, pretending competence like it was couture. I slipped out, walked to the observation suite behind the one-way glass, the HR room where they usually hid to fire people. Poetic, I thought, as I took a seat. The boardroom lights dimmed at 9:31 a.m. The projector sputtered to life, washing the wall with Q3 operational excellence and strategic wins. Blake's voice filled the room, smooth, smug, full of numbers that meant nothing. He clicked through charts like a man conducting an orchestra no one wanted to hear. Haley nodded dutifully beside him, the perfect accessory. Evelyn didn't interrupt. Not yet. She was waiting. Slide 6 appeared, something called the success funnel, a term that should have been a red flag all on its own. That's when Evelyn raised her hand. "Before we proceed," she said evenly, her voice slicing through Blake's monologue, "we received supplemental materials this morning. I'd like to present them briefly." Blake blinked, confused. The board shifted in their seats. "Of course," he stammered, "but maybe after the—" Evelyn didn't wait. She connected the USB, tapped twice, and projected its contents to the main screen. The video began immediately. The timestamp glowed faintly. July 14th, 11:46 p.m. The angle was slightly tilted, but the footage was clear. Haley entered Blake's office carrying a takeout bag and tablet. She sat at his desk, logged into his terminal, and began clicking through files. Seconds later, Blake stumbled into frame, whiskey glass in hand, tie undone. His slurred voice bled through the speakers. "Go to Orion, Phase 3. Just close it out. We're good. Nobody checks." Haley hesitated. "It says Lauren didn't sign yet." Blake chuckled, waving his glass. "Doesn't matter. Use the template. Change the footer. Her name's on the last one. Just copy-paste." The room froze. The board members leaned forward. The playback rolled on. Haley editing, Blake approving, both laughing. Then silence. Blake's face at the front of the boardroom went chalk white. Evelyn pressed pause, then rewound 10 seconds, replaying his words again. "Use the template. Change the footer." The audio echoed through the sterile air. She clicked forward to the next exhibit. On screen appeared 2 documents side by side. Project Orion, Phase 3 sign-off. Left, Lauren Price's verified signature hash. Right, a jagged, pixelated forgery labeled approved. Underneath, system log metadata. Submitted by B. Dawson, Exec Terminal 12, credential match. Failed. The air thickened. Evelyn didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward. It was seismic. Every person in that room could feel it. The soundless collapse of Blake Dawson's authority. He tried to smile, but his lips trembled. "Okay," he started, his voice barely holding. "Let's not jump to conclusions here. Clearly this is some kind of clerical issue. Maybe Haley pulled the wrong file." "We've been under a lot of pressure. Long nights, tight deadlines. Things slip." He gave a nervous chuckle that died halfway through. No one responded. Haley stared at the table, her face drained of color, hands knotted in her lap. Blake pressed on, desperate. "Look, these are isolated incidents, a misunderstanding at worst. I'll have the team review everything." But he stopped mid-sentence because Evelyn had quietly shifted her laptop toward the projection feed again. The next file appeared, a simple table labeled Authorization Log Summary. 3 entries highlighted in red. User, B. Dawson. Terminal, Exec Suite 12. Time, 11:46 p.m., 12:03 a.m., 12:21 a.m. Status, credential mismatch. Evelyn's tone was surgical. "This report shows 3 distinct logins from your account. Each corresponds with a falsified approval." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Blake swallowed hard. I was probably logged in remotely," he said weakly. "Our VPN glitches sometimes." One of the board members, a man from finance named Marshall, leaned forward. "VPNs don't slur words and pour whiskey," he said dryly. Another board member stifled a laugh. Then a new voice cut through the air. Not Evelyn's, not Blake's. It came from behind the glass. "Mine. Except you logged in from your desk," I said, steady, calm, the mic transmitting cleanly into the room. 3 times. Same credentials, same machine ID, same timestamp. Every head turned. Through the one-way glass, they could finally see me in the reflection. Calm, collected, notebook in hand. Blake's eyes widened, shock flashing into something close to fear. For 12 years, I'd been invisible. Now I was the only one in focus. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The board chair, Richard Callahan, a man with steel gray hair and sharper instincts, leaned back slowly. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "continue." She clicked to the next file, the policy document Blake had signed years ago without reading. Her voice was crisp, almost ceremonial. "Company Policy Manual, Section 6.1F. Any manager found to have knowingly manipulated internal systems or falsified documentation for personal or financial gain shall be terminated immediately with no severance and full liability review. The words landed like a gavel. Blake tried to protest. "Wait, you can't just..." But Richard raised a single hand. "Sit down, Mr. Dawson." The authority in his tone snapped whatever was left of Blake's ego. HR, already prepared, opened a red folder. Across the table, Evelyn pulled up one final slide, a visual overlay of the forgery's edit trail, showing timestamps, machine ID, and last login credentials. Every arrow pointed to Exec Suite 12. Blake's office, Blake's machine, Blake's login. When Evelyn closed the file, the projector went dark. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Richard spoke. "HR," he said, voice calm but final. "Prepare the necessary documents. Effective immediately, Blake Dawson is relieved of duty and barred from company communication. Miss Monroe as well." Haley gasped, finally breaking her silence. "Wait, Mr. Callahan, I didn't... He told me to..." Richard didn't look at her. "You acted on fraudulent instruction. That's participation." HR slid 2 thick envelopes across the table. Termination packets. "Your access has already been revoked," the HR director said, her voice flat. "Security will escort you to collect your personal items. Leave all company property here." Blake just sat there, staring at the folder like it was an alien artifact. Then he reached for his phone, but his screen was already locked out. It had executed the kill command the moment Evelyn confirmed credential mismatch. Across the glass, I watched it all in silence. It wasn't joy I felt. It was equilibrium, order restored. Blake's arrogance had finally met its audit trail. When security arrived, they didn't speak. 2 quiet professionals in navy jackets entered the boardroom, their presence alone enough to drain whatever dignity Blake and Haley had left. They stood, wordless, like puppets whose strings had been cut. Blake's hands trembled as he tried to gather his things. Haley looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, her confidence stripped down to raw panic. She clutched her purse like a life raft, whispering, "I didn't mean to." But the sentence died in her throat. Nobody answered. Nobody pitied them. The only sound in that glass box of truth was the squeak of shoes on tile as they were led down the corridor, past the desks, past the monitors, past the team they'd deceived. 12 years I'd watched this company let arrogance thrive and talent rot in silence. And now, for once, silence was justice. Richard Callahan closed his folder with deliberate calm. "All current bonus approvals are frozen," he said. "Evelyn, conduct a full audit of the executive division. I want every project reviewed since April. If there's more, we'll find it." Evelyn nodded once, already opening her laptop. Around the table, the board murmured in quiet agreement. For the first time in years, the conversation wasn't about Blake's buzzwords or quarterly optics. It was about truth. Then, from the corner of the screen, another window flickered to life. The CEO, remote from New York, had joined the call. His face appeared, sharp and unreadable, framed by skyline glass. He'd missed most of the meeting, but clearly had been briefed. "Is it handled?" he asked, his voice smooth but edged with steel. Richard nodded. Both dismissed, effective immediately. The CEO's gaze shifted, locking onto the glass wall where I sat behind the observation panel. "Lauren Price," he said. The board turned toward me. For the first time in a decade, they actually saw me. I stood, heart steady, and walked through the door into the boardroom. Every step sounded louder than it should have. My palms were cold, but my posture was calm. I stopped beside the conference table, across from the CEO's projected face. His expression softened slightly, curiosity cutting through authority. "How long have you known?" he asked. "Long enough to back it all up," I said simply. Something like a smile ghosted across his features. Good, he replied. We need people who remember things. He turned toward Richard. Offer her the role. Director of Compliance Transition. Effective immediately. For a moment, the air seemed to stop. The title echoed in my mind. Director. Compliance. Transition. 12 years of ghost work, of invisible labor, of quiet competence, and now the system that ignored me wanted me to rebuild it. I could have asked for anything then. A raise, a corner office, a bonus. But I only wanted one thing. I'll take it, I said, on 3 conditions. A locked office, my own keycard access, and working cameras. That drew a few smiles from around the table. Evelyn nodded approvingly. The CEO's grin was subtle but genuine. Granted, he said. And Lauren, good work. The feed ended. As the room dissolved into whispers of logistics, who would replace Blake, how to handle the announcement, the PR fallout, I walked to the window overlooking the lobby. Below, I could see Blake and Haley being escorted toward the elevators, each carrying a cardboard box. Their reflections in the glass looked like ghosts fading out of their own story. I thought of the nights I'd stayed late while they drank, the projects I'd built while they collected credit, the forms they'd forged with my name. 12 years of being background noise, 12 years of being overlooked, underestimated, and overwritten. Now, I was the one writing the policy. The cameras hummed overhead, steady and bright. People forget that the quiet ones, the ones who keep receipts, who notice the blinking lights, who log every click, aren't weak. They're the archive, the proof, the final word. Justice didn't come with fireworks that day. It came in the shape of silence, complete, undeniable, and earned. The boardroom emptied slowly after that. People filed out with the reverence you'd give a wake, voices low, eyes cautious. No one wanted to make eye contact with me, but I didn't mind. For once, the silence wasn't avoidance, it was respect. Evelyn lingered, closing her laptop before turning to me. That was surgical, she said softly. You didn't just expose him, you protected the company. I gave a small nod. I protected the truth, I replied. She smiled faintly, almost approving. That's rarer. Then she gathered her notes and left me standing there with the hum of the projector still cooling behind me. Outside, the office had the eerie calm of a storm's aftermath. Desks that had once buzzed with gossip now sat still. Word spreads fast in corporate corridors, faster than Wi-Fi. By the time I walked back to my cubicle, people were pretending to work while refreshing Slack threads for news. Blake's name was already being whispered in past tense. HR had disabled both his and Haley's accounts, and their pictures vanished from the internal directory before lunch. Efficiency. Funny how fast the machine cleans up after itself when embarrassment is involved. I spent the next few hours quietly doing what I'd always done. Cleaning up the mess, reviewing the logs, patching permissions, flagging dormant credentials no one remembered existed. But this time, I wasn't the ghost doing invisible work. I was the Director of Compliance Transition, officially appointed by 1:00 p.m. Evelyn sent the confirmation email herself with the subject line. Welcome to the table, Lauren. Short, professional, perfect. Still, I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Instead, I opened a fresh document and started drafting something that would matter. A reform plan. Real compliance, not the checkbox kind Blake pretended to run. I wrote until my coffee went cold. New access protocols, dual authentication across terminals, auto-audit triggers for off-hours logins. By the time the clock hit 5 p.m., the first blueprint of my department was done. Clean, quiet, and bulletproof. As the building emptied, I took one last look around the floor. The hum of air conditioning, the flicker of monitors going to sleep. It all felt different now. The same room, the same smell of old carpet and burnt coffee, But I wasn't the ghost anymore. I was the lock on the door. Before I left, I went down to the security booth. The tech on duty looked up, startled. "Oh, hey, Miss Price. Everything okay?" I smiled. "Better than okay. I just wanted to check the camera feeds." He blinked, confused. "All good, ma'am. New firmware installed this morning." I nodded. "Good. Let's keep them that way." I turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Oh, and make sure camera 4 stays online permanently." He chuckled, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. Driving home that night, the city lights smeared across my windshield like a new language. My phone buzzed with a message from Evelyn. "Board impressed. CEO wants a written post-mortem for next week's audit. You'll lead." I texted back 2 words. Understood. Delivered. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Same tired eyes, same hair pulled back in a low knot. But there was something new behind the exhaustion, a steadiness. I thought about what the CEO had said. We need people who remember things. Maybe that was what I'd always been. Not invisible, not forgotten, but the memory of the place. The archive that kept it honest. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and renamed the last backup folder. Case/closed LP. Then, for the first time in years, I didn't open my email before bed. The following Monday, an internal memo went out. Effective immediately, Lauren Price has been promoted to Director of Compliance Transition. She will oversee integrity restructuring across all departments. The replies flooded in. Congratulatory emojis, polite messages from people who'd ignored me for years. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I opened a blank page and typed one line that would go at the top of every new compliance policy. Remember who keeps the lights on and who's watching when they flicker. Because in the end, that's how it really works in corporate America. Not every war is loud. Not every victory gets applause. Sometimes justice comes wearing a blazer, holding a file, and walking quietly out of a boardroom while the ghosts finally rest.